as she crossed the inner wall, guarded well by Steeper's men, nodding her way through to Crapelgate. Osrith knew she was being followed. Not followed as stalked, or at least, she hoped not. Just the scrunch of feet on dry earth as she went. Who would have known she was gone? Surely not the Etheling, for she had told him he would tell his father he had left, if he dared to come again. Edward said he didn't care, so Osrith told him she would tell Steeper, which had caused the 12-year-old to fall to silence. Besides, when she had looked beyond his door, he was sound asleep, and she wasn't going to be long. Osrith had left with about an hour of daylight to spare, and would be back by nightfall. A robber then, or one of the palace guards. Or Ethelwold, though he was usually inebriated and sleeping the sleep of drunks everywhere by now. She slipped into a side passage, between two houses, her boots covered in the blood of whichever animal was slaughtered that day. Few animals were put to the blade in the month before harvest, so she was guessing this household had been caught short with last year's winter stores and had to get by with a pig or sheep. She waited. Feet passed by, the scratching came again. She was not put out about having to fight, that would be easy enough. But she was going to visit a marginalized group of people on the northwest of Winchester. Every city had them. Dunnottar had Bark, who had been put to death as a witch, and Sula, her daughter, who had ended her pregnancy. Britons made a living servicing the spiritual and physical needs of a population. Christianity was only a veneer for many, and Osrith wondered how different Saxons were to the Danes and Norse, who openly worshipped their gods. Many Saxons seemed to wear the veneer of Christianity, like a best set of clothes. The Saxon church was different here, different to Alba. Osrith barely remembered services at Bibbenberg, but knew well the Irish church, its silences, its welcomes to travellers by washing their feet, its decentralized leadership, and the way priests grew their tonsured hair long at the back, to their shoulders, with a bald pate. Osrith was here to see whichever Briton could supply her physically, could sell her the roots she needed, lily, tansy, and also terebinth, that effective healer of wounds. She had brought the 2 silver coins that Alfred had given to her, and more besides from the stable. Then it was again, a scritching, and a figure passed on the road. Looking up, the evening sky shone on beams Osrith could climb, and climbed she did, until she reached the thatch, wondering, not for the first time, that birds must have this view every day. How long to wait, that was the question. Her mind drifted to Utard's straw thatch, and wondered whether he knew the silver had gone. How did she think she was going to feel about her brother? Different to how Osrith knew she felt now. Maybe her dream was a child's dream, about rescue and safety. Chancing to leave, she made her way towards the still orange band of sky, dropping down by the outer wall. Marginalized both socially and geographically, Osrith thought, a mile from the Aegean, and the test was much further. Lights shone in homesteads. Yes, another veneer of Christianity here, more like the Irish church, and should any of Alfred's men come asking, they could see they were Christians, outwardly at least. A young girl was playing with a stick by a muddy bank. Clean-faced, as all Britons were, she eyed Osrith with suspicion. "Sut May," she tried, "sut white tea?" The girl stared back at her, dark brown eyes wide, but didn't answer. Osrith tried again. "She won't answer you," a voice came from beside the girl. In the mud street a woman, older than Osrith, but not elderly, black hair plaited down to her waist, face unlined and free from the damage of disease, peered at Osrith. "Even if she could understand you, and I wonder where you learn it, Cymraeg, I can barely understand you." She glared up at Osrith. "Alba," Osrith admitted. "Stratclota. Cumbraland." The woman replied to her in Welsh, and Osrith could barely discern what she said. She did not speak it as Half had spoken it. "You want to know where I live?" Osrith offered, in translation. The woman laughed. There was no humor in it. "You Saxons think you know everything," she scorned. "You have driven the tongue from our children by bribing them with schooling in a church and offered them food." Osrith ignored the hostile, arm-folded woman and leaned to the child again. "Hello, who are you?" "I am Osrith, the Gael," she added, with emphasis. "Seren," the girl replied, not taking her eyes off Osrith. Seren, Osrith pursued, do you know where your healer lives? Again the girl said nothing. Then, she turned to the woman beside her. Osrith took a step towards her. You are the healer for the Cymric here? She asked. Who wants to know? I am Osrith, I work at the palace. The woman screwed up her face. I am Osrith, she imitated in a sing-song voice, I work at the palace. Osrith put her hand to Bué, and stepped quickly to the woman. Let me put it another way, Osrith spat, in Saxon, in English, in Gaelish, or in Cymric, or whatever language you like, I am a warrior working in the pay of the king, though I am not fussy for whom I work. I have killed Gaels, killed Picts, killed Danes, Norse, Saxons, Angles and, yes, Cymric. I am a warrior who has silver, and I am looking to buy herbs. Bué went shmm in her scabbard as she withdrew her a little. Will you sell me? But the Cymric woman held up a hand. I am Allah, healer and wise woman here. And here. She looked around the roofs of the shabby, one-story hovels sitting close to one another that made for the Cymric settlement, is not the place to talk. Smiling at the girl, who carried on playing with her stick, the woman trod past Osrith and beckoned to her. Shadowkin for Iorn, Osrith said to the girl, who smiled a little and watched her, turning her head as Osrith passed. She knows something of the language, Osrith thought, and it is easy to see I am at a Cymric settlement, silver transcends all culture and tongue. Pushing aside a curtain, the woman stepped into a house shelved on three sides. A side room was also curtained. Near the back of the hovel a fire was smoking, an acrid stench coming from it. I wish to buy roots. Osrith was direct and to the point. Lily, Tansy, Terebinth, Narcissus. Allah turned from her course, towards the shelves, jars of many things on them. You are with child? Osrith shook her head. But you know what these are for? Lily root for reducing the monthly blood, Tansy for the removal of a child. Terebinth for healing. Allah said nothing, but nodded her head for a moment. I do not have these, she began. Osrith pushed her hand inside her shirt and withdrew a good portion of silver. I do not have these, Allah insisted, eyes on the silver, but I can get them. She crossed to Osrith, staring at the wealth. It may take me some time to find this, I must ask others I know. Then keep the silver as a gesture of trust, Osrith said, holding out the silver towards Allah. Take what you will. At first, Osrith thought Allah was not going to take the coins, but she did, and held open the curtain. Dialogue, Osrith said, and their woman laughed. Few people speak the tongue now. Saxon is what is needed, to live, to get by, to trade. But I do what I can, as do many Britons. She stared at Osrith quizzically. You know Britons? Several, Osrith agreed. Britons who live in Cumbraland and Strathclyde. My mother was a Briton, of the line of Arian. The woman's eyes shone for a moment. Arian I know, she replied, her voice a little warmer, in Osrith's discerning. Taliesin tells us the Britons of Hen-Ed, the Old North, had banded together to drive the Saxons into the sea. But Arian was betrayed by Picts before Ketrarch, and the plan failed. She stepped closer to Osrith, lowering her voice. I hope when the Britons and the Picts try again, they will have the sense not to betray one another. Then her voice returned to how it had been. Where is Strathclyde? North of here, near Alba? Osrith replied. Like Mercia, the king, Eochaid, would be independent. But King Domhnall mac Corstin of the House Alpin claims the kingdom, and Dal Riatu and Pitlands. It is now called Alba. Allah showed her to the boundary of the settlement. More black-haired children played as she passed and Osrith listened for the sound before she left, but there was nothing, and nothing as she crossed over into the northern part of the city, followed the river down to the palace and nodded her way past a sleepy Elfgar. Whoever it was had gone, and she exhaled something of relief to be back in the palace gardens. While she could go where she wished, Osrith had left the Atheling. But as a noise behind her as Osrith got to the part of the palace where the bedchambers were, a stumbling, scraping behind her as she turned onto the corridor, now lit by torches, as the summer sun had dipped and darkness had come at last to that long July day. Osrith turned, only to be pushed against the stone wall by two strong hands. It was Ethelwold. His breath stank of stale ale and she turned her head away from him as he pressed her shoulders back. Damn it! She had not been prepared enough, her mind on other things, Osrith chided herself. In the semi-darkness he was leering at her. Come on, Ethelwold was saying, his face close to hers, his nose still at an odd angle where it was healing poorly after her fight with him. Come on, just one little kiss, and, he broke off to splutter, then looked back to her, his eyes unable to fix on her, his hand groping for her chest, and I could make you queen. But Osrith shook herself away from him. I was promised to be made queen by another man once before, Osrith told him as she wrenched one shoulder free. Two other men. And do you know what happened to them? Ethelwold said nothing, but shook his head at her, grinning for no other reason than because he was drunk. One was killed for his treachery. The other will be killed by me the next time I meet him. She shook her other shoulder free and stalked from him. Ethelwold didn't move. Osrith was about to leave him and return to Edward, then she turned. Which one will you be, Ethelwold? You will do as I say. Ethelwold slurred as she strode away from him, then slumped onto the stone floor. Osrith glanced back. Do not kill Ethelwold, Stipa had said when he had given instructions on how to guard Edward. But make sure he does not challenge the Atheling, otherwise Alfred will be angry. He was drunk, Osrith said, she hadn't caused that. But even so, she turned to help the king's nephew, for he was now trying to vomit, and was choking because of the angle at which had fallen. Once he was on his side, Osrith stepped past him and up the corner, passing the route to the guard room then right to Edward's room. Edward was awake when she barred his door from the inside, and prepared to lie down in her blankets. His bedclothes were twitching, and though tired, Osrith sat on the end of his bed. It was not possible that he could have followed her and got back before her. No. Even if he had run, it would be impossible. So that narrowed it down to everyone in Winchester except for the Atheling and his cousin. Where have you been? A walk, to think, Osrith replied. I notified the duty guards, you were perfectly safe, she added. Edward rolled his eyes. I know I'm safe. I'm always safe, he grumbled. Well, thank the Lord God that you are. Osrith bit back. I was with a prince-in-waiting before, in Aryan who was not safe, who got away from his father's kingdom by the skin of his teeth, and with a lot of favors from allies called at the last moment. Constantine's cousin, Eochaid, would have run him through, in Glashku, Osrith was sure, like she was also sure that he and Grioghair, Gerrick, as he had been introduced to them that night, had made a pact to aim for the throne of Alba, eliminate and, if they could, the next two heirs, Constantine and Domnall. Just like Ethelwold wanted to do with Edward. In Alba, Edward bounced above his covers like a child, and sat, cross-legged by her, his blonde hair wafting in the slight breeze of his bedchamber. It was not Alba then, Osrith said. It was Pitland, Dull Rioter, and Straight Cloter. It was the prince's cousin's wish to unite the three kingdoms. Domnall's wish, though he hadn't quite achieved it yet. Her heart beat fast in her chest for a moment, wishing she was back there still, fighting for her king, watching him make his successes and carry out his reforms, being a part of them, rather than reading about them clandestinely, months later, at the monastery. She forced a smile onto her face. Alba had already done better against the Norse than your father and Ceolwulf and the kings in the north have against the Danes. Of course, the Scottish king has less land to defend, and a lot of the defending was of well-known, difficult-to-attack territory. Osrith stretched out her legs. Like my father would Inglaland, and the Heptasy, Edward replied, solemnly, his mind awake now, and there would be little to be done to make him go back to sleep until he had asked her what he wanted. Then, maybe, he would rest, and she would not have a grumpy Atheling complaining about their fighting drills, or his lessons or his food the next day. Better, For there are fewer people, they empty fewer kingdoms, and the Norse can't penetrate inland using the waterways, and there are too many hills and valleys, which is an advantage to the Scots, for they can make little wars on the Norse and drive them back to the coastline. Edward looked more than a little put out by her words, by her implied criticism of his father, and Alfred's ambition. Osric saw the look, and frowned. He has less land to unify than King Alfred, Osric pointed out. Your father had more to do, has more to do, because his ambition is far greater. A look of satisfaction was beginning to displace that which had been indignation. And the Danes are occupying half of it. The Norse settled but a little, whereas the Danes much more. The Norse never got a foothold as the Danes have done, only in the far, far north, and some of the islands. It's Aryan they have settled in, and colonized, not Alba, she soothed. And there is this land, Edward continued, coming closer to her. A land called Strathclyde. You said it, just now? Osric smiled back to him. Did you know it? Knew it, ate in it, slept in it, fought in it, lost blood in it, she replied. Lost my heart in it, she added, silently to herself. Which is how you fight so well, Edward concluded for her. Ethelfled would fight, she wishes she were a prince. Ethelfled was also who told Ethelwold you had left the palace. I listened. Crept about, listening, more like, Osric rebuked, in silence. Ethelfled. Had it been she who had followed her? Surely not. Not that it mattered. Osric could leave the Atheling for some things. Besides, Ethelfled was to be married the day after tomorrow to Lord Ethelred, who really should have been named King of Mercia, and would be gone from Winchester. The guard who had arrived with Lord Ethelred was excellent, and Osric had met Aldhelm, who had made the perniciously choleric Meeral break into the first smile Osric had seen of him. Odda's guardsman was happy to see Lord Ethelred's advisor, for this was because he was Meeral's brother-in-law. Osric had a gratifying time as the Mersons and the West Saxons shook hands with one another, Elfgar introducing everyone to everyone else, including Osric. It had made a change from a few hours earlier. Ethelfled was busy tormenting her younger brother by hiding his training sword, something for which Osric rebuked her for. Outraged that Osric had interfered in her cruel game, Ethelfled reached up to her chest, taking a squeeze. "You real woman!" she exclaimed, dropping her hand as Osric pulled back, indignantly. "Everyone says so. I thought Ethelwold was lying, but the guards say so too, even steeper." Osric said nothing, standing still, jaw tense. How close she was to giving this haughty young woman the same pasting she had given her cousin a week before. But that would not go down very well if she had to put on the act of being a shy, fulsome maiden the day after next. "If I had kept the jewels your brother stole from you for me, I know I would wear them better than you," Osric thought back, bitterly. But Ethelfled was busy laughing at her own discovery. "I am a prince," Osric boasted. What had been Domhnall's words? That she had behaved like a Gael? It was enough. A Gaelish prince. "Is that why your hair has been cut short? Because you pretend to be a man? Those who have wronged their master have their hair cut." It was not Osric who spoke, but Edward. Damn him for speaking out. Damn herself for telling the Atheling in the first place. Ethelfled's eyes widened in unconcealed contempt. "What did you do?" she asked, hands on hips. "Nothing I could help," Osric replied, coldly. For, if she had been a man, Osric knew, the fight against Bryn, Domhnall's guard, would have been legitimate. "What?" This time it was Edward who had asked. Like those of his sister, his eyes shone. "I killed the man of another lord and fought a fight because of it." Edward noticed her fingers curling over Bue's hilt. But Ethelfled had stood in front of her, her face severe. She looked across now, to Edward, all lit up and alive with thoughts as he leaned towards her. "I will fight one day," he declared, as he sat, all alight with determination, as his short sleep had given him fortitude. Osric hoped he wouldn't want to spend all night talking to her. "I will fight Danes and build a Dinglaland with Ethelfled." Osric's heart sank. If he wasn't careful, she would end up downtrodden as a king, too, by his strong-willed sister. "Must she be included?" Osric asked, knowing the answer. Oh yes. Edward enthused, she fights better than me. But one day, you will be king, Osrith explained. You will be stronger than Ethelflaed, when you are grown to a man. But Edward just smiled back at her. I will still need her, and she will need me, he declared, and Osrith looked at him for a moment, quietly confident that the nasty, spiteful girl of an elder sister who took his things and tormented and teased him would be by his side his entire life, and a sudden pain crept into Osrith's heart. She never had that with Uhtred, would never have that. They were both grown now, the opportunity of knowing one another in childhood stolen from them. Beside her, Edward sat up, brightly. You will teach me, he declared, as if he had just worked out a puzzle and was delighted with himself that he had the right answer. Stipa Snotna teaches you, Osrith replied, patiently. He is your father's man. But you have fought the Scots. Edward protested, plaintively. I must fight the Scots, or else ... or else my firstborn son. I have fought with the Scots, Osrith pointed out, her most beloved people coming to her mind. And now am I not in Alba. I cannot teach you. Besides, I am your guard, I defend you, until you can defend yourself. Yes. Edward looked thoughtful. But, if I fought you, you would have to defend yourself? Osrith smiled. He was as clever as his father. Yes, Osrith agreed. If your father consents.